Hello and welcome to this special edition of Nonprofit Pro's webinar series, the Generative AI Playbook. Hi, I'm Chris Lyons, President and Publisher of Nonprofit Pro and the host of today's webinar. And I'm thrilled that we will be covering one of the most dynamic topics in the nonprofit marketplace today, generative AI. But before we get started, let me take a second to point out the resources widget at the bottom of your console. It looks like an open book, and if you missed the Tech Tips video we played prior to the webinar, you can always click this widget for more information on how to use your console and access other webinar resources such as today's slides and the other resources that we have available from today's webinar. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, feel free to give a heart or a thumbs up using the reactions widget on your console. It looks like a smiley face. So I'm very thrilled to have with us today Sean Olds, who's the co-founder of Boodle AI. Boodle AI has been in the business of helping nonprofits with navigating, implementing, and executing AI-driven initiatives since before AI was cool. Sean will share with us the Generative AI Playbook, a very practical way to use 12 key steps in the generative AI journey. So with that, Sean, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Chris. Pleasure to be here today. And really excited to talk about generative AI and more specifically how nonprofits can use it. As a quick background, the QR code there, if you want to grab it and follow me on LinkedIn, I do try to publish at least a couple of times a week on what we see going on in the generative AI space, and very often specifically how generative AI impacts nonprofits. So please feel free to follow me. If you want to connect with me, please just put in the message as you connect that you were from the CFRE training. And if you've got any specific questions, always happy to answer them. As background, I started my career at the United States Military Academy studying computer science. I will fully admit, unfortunately, most of the programming languages I learned there, they now teach in the history of computers class. So I have a wonderful team at Boodle who developed what we have built over time. But I got my start in the Army, couldn't fly out of airplanes properly, so the Army kicked me out. And I went into building companies, got into the startup space in the late 90s. And for the past 2 decades, have pretty much been focused on building companies. I did take a brief respite after September 11th to return to government service, doing counterterrorism work in both Southwest Asia and Africa. And then from there went on to back into building companies, did it both domestically and internationally. My tie to the nonprofit space started right after I graduated from college, actually. I went into my first nonprofit, which was based in the youth education space, and continually focused on that over 25 years, always serving on some sort of board focused on youth education. But also after my time in the military, worked with several veteran service organizations. And I know the experience of being on a board is much different than many of the people who are sitting in this audience today, who are frontline operators in the nonprofit space. Over the past 8 years with Boodle, I've had the opportunity to work with many of you on helping to drive AI adoption in nonprofit organizations. And that has given me very keen insights into both the challenges, but also the benefits that are there. I wanted to provide a few kind of quotes that really resonate with me, our team, as we have built out the technology, but just how we approach technology. Wonderful Bill Gates quotes, the advance of technology is based on making it fit in so that you don't even really notice it. So it's part of everyday life. 2 years ago, before the advent of ChatGPT, when I would talk about artificial intelligence, I would often ask the crowd or start the speech by asking, how many people have used AI in the past 10 days? And invariably, it'd be less than 10% of the crowd that would raise their hand. And so I would look at the other 90% and would ask them, so those of you who didn't raise your hands, none of you watched Netflix, none of you took a lift over here, none of you have used Siri or Alexa, right? Because technology and AI is actually permeated into our lives and we just don't realize it. Many of the technologies we interact with on a daily basis have AI driven behind them. And that's where they become successful. People don't have to sit down and become PhDs in AI. it just enters into their lives. Now, that being said, Boodle, from its inception, my co-founder France and I have always really pushed that the strongest AI team is the human machine team. And so the Albert Einstein quote that the human spirit must prevail over technology is one that really resonates with us and is very powerful. This third quote is one that no one has ever directly attributed where he said it, but it's always been attributed to Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest of a species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but one that is the most responsive to change. And being that most rooms I'm in, or all rooms I'm in, I'm never the smartest, I'm never the strongest, but having started a career in the military, I'm very good at adapting to change. But we see the most advanced companies or organizations, nonprofit organizations, that are leading the way as the ones who are willing to adapt to change. And then finally, Steve Jobs, it's innovation that will distinguish between leaders and followers. And I think most of you are on this call today because you're leaders in your organization and you want to figure out what innovations you can bring into your organization. I hope we'll be able to articulate that a little more today. Now, you've heard and probably seen a lot of webinars on how ChatGPT can help you with what you're doing in your nonprofit organization. And it is definitely one tool, and it's a tool you can use inside of BoodleBox. I'm going to use BoodleBox in my examples today, not to push what we're doing, but because we're bringing together ChatGPT and Bard and Llama and Claude and many other large language models all in one place. So I use it because it's the tool I use, not just on a weekly or a daily basis, but sometimes on an hourly basis. I'll show you in the context of this, it's a tool I use not just at work, but also at home as well. But as you see the examples, for those of you who are not familiar with generative AI, and I'm assuming most people have at least tried generative AI, what we see is there's a lot of people who get on and they try to, they make a haiku for their bowling team, right? But it doesn't go much further than that. One of the big problems we've seen is there's not a heavy adoption, and we'll talk more about that later. But for those of you who this is your kind of first experience with generative AI, the difference between generative AI and what you would call more traditional AI, most of the traditional AI was built on predictions. We would model on a group of donors that we had, and then we would use that model to find new donors. With generative AI, it's training on huge amounts of data, and it's actually generating net new. And we'll show you what that generation looks like here in a minute. One of the things I would say is don't be scared of AI. I know several years ago when we started the company, you would say the words AI, and people would picture the steely head with red eyes coming at them. Couldn't be further from the truth. But we would say, don't be scared, don't be late. And there's three key tenets to that. One is it's just setting expectations appropriately. So I talk to, not just in the nonprofit space, but in the commercial space, executives almost on a weekly basis who are not using generative AI. And when I ask them why not, they say, well, I sat down, I tried it for about 5 minutes, and it just gave me really bad answers. And I asked them, when's the last time you walked into a team meeting and in the first 5 minutes didn't get the answers you wanted and you walked out? You can't look at generative AI as a silver bullet. It's not a one shot, one kill and perfection all the time. It is a teammate, and we as teammates, we all get things wrong, we get things right, but we work together to get towards a solution. And so the expectation when you work with generative AI needs to be that you're going to work with it. It's not going to be perfection right away. It is not the answer to everything you need, but it is definitely can be part of the solution in most things that you do. And then finally, it's that expectation of, along with it being part of your team, I ask people to picture it as they just hired one of the top tier graduate students out of graduate school for their field, right? So you're going to bring that person in on day one, and you've got to give them some background. You've got to explain to them what they need to do. And then they're going to spend the most of that first day doing things that you don't want to do, things you did 5, 10, 15 years ago that you don't want to do today. At the end of the day, they're going to need feedback, right? They're going to need to know about things in the company they don't know about right now that they can add into what they do. They're going to need to know that you as their supervisor don't like to use contractions, so they don't use them anymore. And as you do that feedback, they're going to get stronger the second day. And each day they're going to get better and better. But if you picture them as a colleague coming in who's going to help, rather than someone who's just going to give you perfect answers all the time, you're going to get a lot more out of the platforms that you use. Now, what has been the big problem with adoption? There's a lot of hype around generative AI. We even heard as late as last November, Sam Altman, who's the founder of ChatGPT or OpenAI, announced it as Open Dev Day that they had 100 million weekly active users. Now, if you're sitting in the United States with a population of just over 300 million, that sounds like a lot of people. But when you put it in the context of almost 6 billion people a day log into the internet, that's less than 2% of the internet population is actually using generative AI. And McKinsey backed that up, at least for the United States, in a report they did in December, where they said that less than 10% of the workforce is using generative AI daily. So the good news there is, if you're not using it or your organization has not embraced it yet, you're not behind. You're not late yet. You will be soon, but you're not yet. Some of the big barriers people express is concern around becoming a prompt engineer. For those of you who haven't heard the term prompt engineering, when you come in to a generative AI platform, there's a prompt window. It looks very similar to the Google window. And what most of us do is we take 20 years of Google conditioning and we sit down and we type the words Chinese restaurant in, which Google does a wonderful job with. Generative AI, not so much. And so people know that there's a way to talk to these large language models, and they get scared by that. They get intimidated by that. Others express just fears in understanding AI or finding the particular use cases. The other big problem is people aren't sure how to integrate this into their workflows on a daily basis. And so much of this is very siloed. For those of you using ChatGPT, you know that you're doing it in your own little silo. And if you get done after 20 minutes and you get to a really good result, you might be able to screenshot it and share it, but your colleague has to go and recreate whatever you did from scratch. So they're actually duplicating effort. And then the third thing we run into is the ability to incorporate our knowledge securely. And I'll talk about that. There's a lot of concern about taking proprietary information, donor information, and putting it into Microsoft or Google where they can train on it. So what are the 12 ways that we see teams using this? What are the 12 ways you can really empower your team with generative AI? And what's been interesting for us is this list of 12, and I'm going to run through examples of each of these today as part of this CFRE training, is these in the nonprofit space are the same 12 ways we see most for-profit organizations using it as well. At least in their first 30, 60, 90 days of adoption, these are kind of the common go-to things. And in most of the cases, I'm actually going to try and give you examples that were actually used by clients that we've worked with. So we will dig in. So ideation. This comes to us from Norfolk State University. The woman who runs major gift fundraising over there is a very forward-leaning into artificial intelligence. She was actually doing AI before GenAI, but has also embraced GenAI. And you can see this, they're getting ready to do a major capital campaign. Now, we could have done what we would have done several years ago, which was we would have called a meeting, we would have had a bunch of people come together in a room, we would have had a whiteboard, and we all would have tossed around ideas. Instead, what she was able to do in less than 5 minutes is say, hey, I need catchy names for a capital campaign where we plan to announce $90 million goal for our 90th anniversary of Norfolk State University. And boom, there it was. And what you don't see after this is she engaged the bot back and forth. So she engaged the AI, told it, hey, these ones I really like, but these I don't. Do you want to come up with others? And just started a dialogue back and forth to get down to a more narrowed list that worked for her and would ultimately work for the major gift donor, who is going to basically help lead the effort on this. In terms of revision, you can see here an actual example of where we want to write a thank you letter in an email to a first-time donor who's donated less than $500 and under the age of 30. And so now what you're going to do is leverage one of the letter writing bots to go in and write that. What we do, I talked about the fear of prompt engineering, is our AI helpers will actually ask you questions. They will engage you like a colleague to gather the information as needed. And in the background, they will write the prompt for you so you can get to where you need to be. And so you can see here the development director interacting with the bot, and then boom, getting a revision. And then what they're going to do at the end of that is be able to ask for a revision, give it more feedback. Again, it's not going to give the right answer the first time. For those of you who have used other AIs, you can see in this case, they're pulling in Claude into the conversation. So they used an AI helper, and now they're going to pull Claude into that same conversation, no logging into a different place or anything, and simply saying, hey, could you improve it based on this feedback? And now you're getting an improved version. And I do this on an almost daily basis. If I've got a revision of something, I'll ask ChatGPT to take a stab at it. I may make some edits, but then I'll ask Claude to come in and do the same thing. So recommendations. Here's a great example of a gift bot. Please don't tell my wife and kids, but I may have used this for a couple of Christmas present ideas. But in this case, it's a development director trying to find a good idea for a donor that they want to give to. And as you can see, again, the AI helper is not requiring them to type in the perfect prompt. It's going to ask them a series of questions about budget and other things around the donor that will allow the AI to give a better response. One of the things I'll talk about a little bit later is you could actually upload knowledge. So if you had information about this donor, you could upload that into the conversation so that the AI could give a more narrowed response and ideas. And you see here, it provided a list of ideas. Evaluations. So I have sat on, as I mentioned at the outset, numerous boards, and many times boards have personalities. And there are some personalities where no matter how good their idea is, people are not going to like it because of the personality. Now we can remove that. So you see here, it's a pro-con bot. Provide me the pros and the cons to a certain idea. And so now in prep for a board meeting, we can take a topic and have the pro-con bot provide the pros and cons. And now we can present this as an unbiased AI giving us pros and cons that we as a board can discuss, rather than, hey, here's John Smith's ideas, and for the people that don't like John Smith, they're just going to dismiss it patently. So these evaluations can be very helpful. Sentiment analysis. Again, this is another one coming from our friends at Norfolk State University. But what is the current sentiment regarding historically Black colleges and universities among millennials? And so instead of engaging Claude or ChatGPT, which may have a little bit dated information, in this case, you can see it used webbot Google. There's Google, Bing, and Perplexity could all be used for the same thing. But it's now able to scour the internet and bring back a sentiment analysis for a very specific group of people that they're trying to reach out to. Problem solving. So many people, focus on kind of the content generation, how we're going to do marketing materials. If you have trouble with pivot tables, there's Excel bots. So there's a variety of different problems that you can solve. It doesn't have to be limited to, hey, what text can I produce? And what's great is they will go as quick and simple as you want or provide you longer explanations. And as I mentioned at the outset, I use this in daily life. So as my daughter might need tutoring for math, I know how to solve a fractions problem. I know how to solve a circumference or area problem, but I know how to do it just very quickly to actually walk through the methodology that's pulling from some cobwebs. But you can get the AI to walk you through exactly how to do it step by step so that you're able to do it more quickly, more easily, but at the pace you want or to the level of detail you need. Content generation is the one we see most often. And so in this case, I'm giving an example of writing a social post. We've told it that we want to do a social post for our race we're doing on July 4th, and giving it a little bit more detail. You can see the bots come back and ask questions. And now it's written a social post with emojis, by the way. My emoji game was nil before generative AI. I can compete with a teenage girl now on emojis. But here's the great thing is all in one conversation, we created the LinkedIn post and then created the image to go with it. And because it's July 4th, we got a great red, white, and blue image that went with it. And so the width and breadth of what you can do with content generation is amazing. And I'll just show the post one more time, and then you'll see the image pop up here. But there are a variety of different ways that you can use the content generation. And there's the image. One other quick idea is we know many organizations will bring their 50-page annual report in. They need to generate an email, right? They know most people aren't going to read the 50-page email. And so what they do is they just ask the generative AI, give me 8 bullet points that are most pertinent to put in the email. 30 seconds later, you have 8 bullet points to go out to your entire base that might actually pull them in to read part of that annual report now, because there's a specific thing in those bullets that they want to go after. I also wanted to make sure I emphasize this is not just for work. So this was an actual example of our marketing director who wanted to use it to help with a vacation. And so, being able to go in and look at where are the travel opportunities in Germany as you travel. And as you can see here, it's generating ideas and content on places that you can visit, and you can engage it in a conversation. And I have done this for my own family vacations. So what's beautiful about generative AI is, unlike a lot of tools, I think all of us would say, we use Word, we use PowerPoint, we use Slack, and they're great tools and we really like them, but they typically don't come home with us. This is something that can really impact your personal life as well and help to make things even better. I have found things for family vacations that I would have never known about otherwise because of the power of generative AI. And then research and learning assistance. And so this is an example we ran through. It might be a little bit hard to read and watch, but I'll talk at a high level. One of our clients is a Zero Prostate Cancer organization, and they have really taken things to the next level in the way that they're able to leverage generative AI and what they're able to do with it. In fact, as an entrepreneur, one of the things that you love is when your clients teach you how to use your technology. And they have definitely taken it to the next level. But in this particular one, they wanted to research what partner organizations so they could find. And so they gave information about the Zero Prostate, they gave information about what they were looking for, and then they got the AIs to work together and zero down to certain geographies they wanted to look at and find the partner organizations that they could work with there, that they could reach out to. Now, could they have done the same thing 2 years ago? Yes, but it probably would have taken half an hour or an hour of research time, and they were able to do it in about 5 minutes. And different from just Googling things, instead of having a list of, here's all the links I got to go look through, you now have a technology that is bringing all those links together, analyzing it for you, and then giving you the true answer that you're really looking for. Role-playing in QA is a really exciting one. So we created role-playing bots. Many of them are distinguished role-playing bots. So we've identified them as a chief marketing officer role-playing bot or a variety of others. There are also ones you can tell it what type of role you want it to take on. And in the context of fundraising, one of the most interesting uses we've seen is by major gift officers, where a major gift officer getting ready for a meeting with a major gift donor has taken all of the publicly available information about a particular major gift donor, LinkedIn profiles, board profiles that are on the web, and loaded that all into the bot, and then taken all the information about their organization, their fundraising pitch deck, and then asked the AI to take on the role of that particular donor and engage them in a 30-minute practice meeting. And we've had reports back from many of our clients that every time they do it, they get unique questions. It's not generic questions. You could sit down to a chat GPT or Bard or others and just ask it to take on the role of a major gift donor, and it's going to give you very generic major gift answers. In this case, it's giving you questions, or it's giving them questions very specific to that individual. And in one case, we had an individual tell us that in spite of many years of fundraising, the bot posed a question to them they had never encountered before with a potential donor. And when they got to the actual meeting, that donor actually asked that question. So very powerful tool to help you prep and get ready as you go in. And the role playing far precedes fundraising development. We see people who are transitioning jobs doing the same thing. If they knew who they're about to sit down and interview with, they'll load up the information about that individual, the company or nonprofit that they're going to go interview with, and then their own resumes, and then engage in that same practice just to give them a little bit of an edge as they go in. Now, here's the future of generative AI, and many times people will say, well, the future is here. And in this case, the future kind of is here. And this is what we call GroupChat. So in this one, you see Phil has asked about Perplexity, which is a web-based bot. What's the AI workforce look like? He's also adding knowledge about BoodleBox and its organization. And now he's commented that he's going to bring Jane into the conversation. And you can see at the bottom, Jane has joined. And now what he's doing is he's interacting and bringing another bot in, Opus 3 in this case, Claude's new Opus 3, and asking it to summarize what Perplexity had done. And now that he's done that, he's going to ask ChatGPT-4 if it has the ability to improve on it a little bit. And you can see it's getting a little bit more detailed. And now he's going to bring in the blog post bot and ask it if it could put together an initial blog post based on the information from the other AIs, as well as the knowledge that he has entered. Now, what's great here is, as you're trying to drive adoption of generative AI in your organizations, Philip here is obviously more experienced and is able to show. Jane, who may be a little bit newer, is watching Philip solve a real-world issue, something that they have to do and get done, and she's able to learn. She doesn't need to go attend training sessions. She doesn't need to spend hours on YouTube trying to see how other people can do it. She's watching a peer or a colleague actually solve a real-world issue that they have, and will be able to carry that forward now in the interactions that she does. And I'm going to actually introduce you to the idea of GroupChat here in a minute. We will actually offer to all of you the ability to take part in a nonprofit power GroupChat. And it will continue on beyond this webinar if you want to. Now, before we leave that though, there are ethical and legal considerations. And I saw some of the questions that people brought in initially. And this is an area where a lot of nonprofits have a lot of concern. And the nonprofits that have not adopted generative AI, this tends to be one of the big obstacles. And so the first one is around intellectual property rights, right? We heard a lot of concerns initially about the data that was being trained on. I live in Colorado. I have a neighbor who is a very successful author. And she was very dismayed initially because she's found out that some of the early large language models were trained on books she had written, even though she never gave permission for that to happen. And what has happened over the past 18 months is the industry is fixing that. It isn't fixed, but it's fixing that. And we're looking at what are the right ways to handle intellectual property rights? What are the right ways to respect the creativity of creative thinkers, but still be able to capitalize on the technology that is there for the betterment of all of us. Number two is misinformation and fake content. You're going to see much more of this. We've already seen it. The deep fake technology has been around for a while. For those of you who don't remember, several years ago, there was a image or a video. It wasn't an image, it was a video of President Barack Obama in the White House espousing all the amazing things about Donald Trump. Now, you obviously knew that was fake, but it looked convincing. And so you can take that back a step and say, well, maybe someone who's not quite as famous, speaking about someone else who's not quite as famous, would be taken at face value. And so we've really got to look at how do we monitor this fake content? How do we detect this fake content? And how do we make sure we're not spreading misinformation? Of course, there's always privacy concerns. You know, when you put your data in, right now, if you put your data into ChatGPT or many of the other large language models, their terms of service will tell you that they are training on your data as it comes in. It's one of the reasons Boodle, since its inception, has always told organizations we work with, we do not share your data, we do not sell your data, we do not put your data into any sort of co-op. We only use your data in the way you direct us to. And that's been very important for us and for the clients that we work with. So one of the things I always tell organizations, when you work with anybody who's going to handle your data, a CRM, an AI provider, anything, make sure you understand what their terms of service allows them to do with your data. And if they're doing anything other with your data than what you want them to do, you need to make sure you're very comfortable with that. And then finally, fourth is bias and discrimination. Now, it's very easy for us to put very biased data in and say, well, look, the machine spat this out, it must be right. One of the things I always caution people on, though, is bias has taken on a very nefarious term or a very nefarious meaning. And the reality is bias is not always nefarious. As we all know, AI is fed by data. Whether it's traditional AI where we're feeding in information about that we have, or generative AI that is consuming vast amounts of data. An example we had early on is in our legacy platform with predictive analytics in AI, we had a series of universities, probably half a dozen universities that worked really well. And I think it was our 7th or 8th university we brought in, and almost none of the models worked. And we couldn't figure out why for a few hours. And what we figured out was all of the previous universities we had worked with had been universities where kids would apply from all 50 states. They would fly in from all 50 states. They would attend college for 4 years, and then they would go get jobs in all 50 states. This particular university was the first university we worked with where 90% of the alumni lived within 100 miles. And so as we put the data in, because location was one of the factors, models and AI will be lazy. And they went towards that. And they said, okay, it seems that every good donor comes from this area. So from now on, when I see someone from this area, I'm going to identify them as a good donor. I'm oversimplifying, but that's part of what happened. And so when we pulled location out of the data that was fed into the model, all of the models worked. And so bias, or the location in that case, definitely expressed a bias, but it wasn't nefarious in any way. And so we need to be aware of both the nefarious bias, but also non-nefarious, and making sure that what we're getting is good feedback and feedback we want to take action upon. As you look at all four of these, there's a quote I really like to cite to. There's a gentleman, Dr. Max Tegmark, who is a professor in Boston, wrote a book a few years ago called Life 3.0, and it's a book about the interaction of humanity with AI. And in it, one of the quotes he gives is that we invented fire, we really messed it up, and then we invented fire alarms, fire extinguishers, fire exits, and fire departments. And so as you look at all of these, it's all about finding the fire extinguishers and the fire alarms that we can build so that when AI does go wrong, when there are intellectual property breaches or misinformation or privacy violations, or bias that is introduced, there's an alarm that goes off to let us know so that we can fix it. And so that's the responsible aspect of using AI. For those of you who are more interested in that, I would highly recommend looking at fundraising.ai, which is another nonprofit organization that is taking a big focus in the responsible use of AI, both generative and traditional AI. Now, when we can get comfortable with all of this and putting this in place, why is it that we want to push forward with generative AI? Why do we want to make sure those fire alarms and fire extinguishers are in place so that we can maximize? And it's because we know that when we can get our team to collaborate with generative AI, they're going to be able to do a lot more. You're going to see people that are able to find and share solutions as a team. And as we move to more remote and hybrid teams, that's going to become more and more essential. We also see, as I showed with the group chat, the ability to actually complete tasks inside of a meeting. So there was a study published, I believe it was by Deloitte at the end of last year, that said if you have more than 6 people on a Zoom, 40% of them are going to be multitasking. Now, are they multitasking because they're bad people? No. The majority of people who multitask, they do it because in an hour-long meeting, they know that they're only needed for a portion of it. They also know at the end of the meeting, there's going to be 6 action items that have to be completed. They're going to be shared amongst the participants, and they're going to have to go off to their silo, and they're going to have to go solve those issues. If they can do it inside of a meeting, though, they don't want to multitask because they know inside that meeting, instead of 6 action items, you're going to walk out with 6 tasks completed. And they want their voice heard. So you're going to get people more interactive in the meeting. And at the end of the meeting, they have a sense of accomplishment, which is great for team culture and camaraderie. And people can now take that item they were going to multitask on, and they can pay 100% attention to it because they have no follow-on tasks that they have to complete out of the meeting. So with that, this QR code will actually jump you into a group chat that we established. And I'd welcome you all to join. It is free to join. But what we did was we started answering. Several of you, about a dozen of you, submitted questions in advance. And so we started answering those questions. The one I didn't answer, there were actually 2 questions, and I'm going to read them while you all, if you want to click into the chat and sign in. One of the questions was, how can generative AI be used to analyze marketing and media campaigns? I am especially interested in using it to analyze data shared with SQL databases. And the second question that kind of dovetailed on that is, how can I use AI to assist with direct response fundraising analytics? So both of those really focus on how do we use generative AI to look at structured data. So right now, you can feed in unstructured data into the platform, and you can do it with many different platforms and be able to get pretty good analysis out of it. So feed in a text document, feed in a variety of other things. Taking the structured data takes a more specialized type of model, but it is something that we will introduce within the BoodleBox ability by this summer. But I wanted to just get that out there because the question was asked, and just make sure there was an understanding between the ability to use unstructured and structured data. So with that, please grab the QR code. Please feel free to join the group chat. We will keep that group chat live indefinitely. So as you've got questions, anything else you want, we're happy to let you partake in that. And as I said, please feel free to contact me, reach out to me with any questions you may have. Happy to answer them. And with that, Chris, I will turn it back over to you.
Terrific. Sean, thank you so much. And we do have a couple of questions that I think would be interesting to address. 2 of the questions that came in while you were presenting are really around the topic of plagiarism and attribution. And the folks are wondering, how can I know if the info I receive is not plagiarized? And the other part of that, the second question is, can you share how you manage disclosure and attribution that you have used certain data or information?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, the easiest way I think to beat the plagiarism side of things, my co-founder is fond of saying generative AI is not going to help you write an A+ paper if you can't write an A+ paper. If you are a B+ producer, it's still going to help you produce a B+ paper. It's just going to get you there much faster. Now, what we see a lot of people do to make sure they're avoiding plagiarism is they'll still take the time to write a first draft, or at least write the outline of a first draft, and then maybe have the generative AI feed from there, because then it's taking their ideas, their content, their voice. The other thing that becomes very powerful, if you really want to get it, and this really helps people who are worried about their voice, especially in marketing materials or their organization's voice, is you can upload as knowledge into the platform what you've done in the past before generative AI ever came along. So if you're a pretty prolific blog poster, or maybe you write articles on a regular basis, if you took the 10 past articles and put it into the system and then said, I'm ready to write my next article, and here's an outline of what I want to do, the generative AI will write a first draft, but in your voice. And so that will really get away from the possibilities of plagiarism or anything else. As far as the citing in sources, this goes to we're creating the fire extinguishers, we're creating the fire alarms. None of this existed. What you're starting to see is a number of models that are now citing. In fact, if you use Perplexity, whether you use Perplexity directly or use it on our website, as it gives information, it will actually cite the sources in the bottom right corner. And so you'll be able to see that as you use it. And I suspect as time goes on, many more organizations are going to try and figure out where can they go to get more sourcing, to get people comfortable with what they're using.
Gotcha. So we just got a question that came in. Is GenAI free like ChatGPT? And I think GenAI or generative AI is a term, not necessarily a product, right?
Correct. Yes. So there are many platforms that provide generative AI for free if you want it. ChatGPT has a free version. It has a paid version as well. If you want their stronger, better version, it's going to cost you money. Claude is the same way. And then BoodleBox, which I demonstrated today, is the same thing. There is a freemium version for those of you that join the group chat. You join for free. There is a paid version too, though. And what the paid version just is allows for more usage.
Gotcha. We had a question that there were 12 ways, and the individual said that we only showed 9 ways in the slide, but I think there's different 12 slides that do describe different ways and thoughts around and insights around generative AI. So, these slides are available for downloading from the widget. So if you can do that, I think you can find those in there.
And Rebecca, thanks for pointing that out. If I will go back and I'll create those 3 slides for whatever 3 we missed, and happy to share it with you if you want to reach out to me directly.
Terrific. So we do have one question that I think is pretty interesting because, you know, one of the major uses for AI and generative AI is around the fundraising side of things. And we have a question in terms of what AI resources would you recommend to find any sleepers within your constituent or donor base? Folks that maybe should be donating more or maybe donating for the first time that are in your first person data that you own.
Yep. So that very much speaks to more the predictive side of AI, being able to take your donors, model those donors, and then apply that model to your base. So in our legacy platform Guidon, we called it hidden gems. So one of the first things we would do with a client organization we worked with is model their major gift donors and then apply that model to all of their donors to see if there was that hidden gem in there. People who demonstrated an affinity for their organization, but maybe had always been a $100 a year donor, but just had never been asked. And wealth screening doesn't always work for those people. There are people who, especially the ultra high net worth people, who will hide a lot of their wealth. And so they don't show up on the wealth screens, but they demonstrate an affinity for what they want, for causes that they want to work with. And so if you can find that affinity, you can then more appropriately work with them and identify them and engage them in an appropriate manner as a major gift donor, rather than just going back as a recurring annual $100 gift donor.
Gotcha. Great. So there are a couple of folks that were saying that maybe we were a little too fast on moving the chat group QR code. So I've put it back up on the screen for folks if they would like. Hopefully that would help. And you can also download the slides and have access to it that way. Another question that just came in is, can Gen AI predict nonprofit fundraising trends or challenges 2 to 3 years from now?
So there are ways you could definitely use both traditional AI to be predictive, and then generative AI to help you understand, once you have those predictions, how you want to engage and move forward. And both of those then become very powerful. But as you're looking at your base of donors, what you have, I think the question was more around broad, how is fundraising going to move forward holistically? But that's a good data point to have, but it's much more powerful to know how it's going to impact your organization. And so bringing in your data, being able to bring in your organizational data will give you deeper insights and allow you to take better actions rather than just taking kind of generic actions. But there are definitely ways to do that. Predictions are predictions, though. They're not always right. There are many times that we've used predictive AI for organizations, and it will give them a list of 10 potential major gift donors, and only 3 of them end up becoming major gift donors. Is it because the machine was wrong on the other 7? It got it patently wrong? Is it because several of the people of the 7 they reached out to had family emergencies, or it just wasn't the right time? There's so many factors that feed into that. But the predictive AI can definitely help you take volumes of data and narrow down into giving you some good insights that you can action from there, much better than just sitting at your desk by yourself trying to come up with macro trends.
Gotcha. So is Boodle in the same class tool as Jasper?
Our differences that we look at, there's Jasper, there's Poe, there's a variety of other platforms out there. Where we see ourselves differentiated is we're very much focused on teams and team collaboration. We also are very focused on the adoption side. As I said at the outset, adoption, in spite of all of the hype and in spite of seeing GenAI in the news a lot, there just is not a lot of adoption. And so what we wanted to do was provide a platform that made it very easy for people to get in. And then for the people who are super users on different platforms, allowing them a platform where they can still access the generative AI that they're used to, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or anything else, but then be able to bring in their colleagues who might be a little bit more timid about using generative AI and give them a tool where it's easy to teach them.
Great. So Sean, I think this is a pretty interesting question in terms of how do you ensure data integrity and avoid GIGO, garbage in, garbage out? I know in the journalism world, we try to make sure that we have 3 references that we source to confirm that something is accurate. Can you provide some insights into that area?
Sure. And there's 2 sides of this. One is just organizationally, how do you do that? And organizationally, it's keeping clean data. It's one, collecting data. It still shocks me sometimes the number of organizations who don't collect anything beyond basic data. And it's not like you have to go out and collect everything on one day, but your ability, because of technology today, to collect more data about your donors is not that difficult. And it will add and give a very rich context as you do more predictions. And as you said, Chris, make sure that what's going in is not garbage, so that what you're getting out are insights that you can be comfortable taking action upon. In the context of generative AI, we are reliant somewhat into the large language models that are being built and are available to us. And what you're finding is when ChatGPT came out and it gave, in some cases, horrible hallucinations, they realized they needed to do better in the type of training they were doing and what they were resulting on. And if you look at just 18 months ago, not even 18 months ago, ChatGPT, when it initially launched, versus ChatGPT 4 today, or Claude 3 Opus today, far different experience in what you're getting. And that's because less garbage in, less garbage out. And as I said, the other thing you can do when you're using generative AI is give in your own knowledge. So being able to upload information about your organization, things that are pertinent to your constituencies, is going to help narrow the generative AI even more and make sure that you're getting even less garbage, or as it's termed, hallucinations.
Gotcha. So I don't know what this question means, but maybe you can help us. Were you using Whitebot or Boodle for the demos that were part of your presentation?
I'm not sure what Whitebot is, but I was using BoodleBox for the entire presentation. And then leveraging within there ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, all of those. And then in addition to that, as you saw, a series of the over 800 AI helpers that we've introduced.
Gotcha. A couple of additional questions that came in. If individuals use BoodleBox rather than groups, Will they still see benefits justifying paying for the use, or do you recommend a different platform for individual users?
I love the question. What we do, one of the things we built into a Teams version of the platform, so not individuals, but people who sign up for Teams, is the ability to see monthly metrics of what you're producing. Being completely transparent, we launched our first teams onto the platform. So we've had almost 2,000 people on the platform, but actually collating them as teams in February. We took 5 of them, and if you look in the group chat, the statistics are actually there. It's one of the last questions that we answered as part of the precursor questions. But in this particular case, a 16-person team came onto the platform. 2/3 of them, I believe, had not used generative AI before. And by the end of the first month, 100% of them were weekly active users. What you also saw was that of the 16 of them, they invested 27 hours on the platform, working on the platform, and they documented over 370 hours of productive work that they created. That would be the equivalent of a 16-person team adding 2 people, or in their case, producing almost $20,000 more in productive work. And as far as the question towards, do you see, is there an ROI there? The license for those 16 people for the month was $250. So we're very confident that teams that collaborate and use this will see a benefit that well outweighs the cost that they're paying for it.
Great. So this kind of ties into that line of thinking. Not all fundraising shops value collaboration and instead emphasize individual achievement instead of teams of fundraising metrics and shared credit for gifts secured. How does Boodle counter this tendency?
Yeah, so I'm not going to say I know every fundraising shop out there, but I know what you're talking about, where there's very individualized focus on going out. But most of those shops, there's still one message. There's an organizational message, there's an organizational theme, there's organizational learnings. And they don't typically want each individual fundraiser going out with different messaging and different branding. And so when it comes to putting everything together, you can really accelerate each of those individuals before they go out and empower them to be quicker and more on message in what they do, but still allow them to pursue as they need to individually. They don't necessarily need to share information about the individual donors that they're going out with. But when it comes to the importance of keeping an organizational's brand consistent, that collaboration usually is still there.
Gotcha. Well, Sean, we've come to the end of our time here, and I know that there were some other questions that are being answered in the group chat. And for folks that have not downloaded the presentation slides yet, those will be resent out through a link tomorrow with an actual on-demand version of this for yourselves to rewatch if you wish, or to share with other people on your teams or other nonprofit executives at other nonprofits. And it will be up on the Nonprofit Pro website for the next 90 days for folks to be able to watch at will. So on behalf of the team here at Nonprofit Pro, we want to thank all of you for attending today's fabulous webinar, and particularly thank Sean for his fabulous insights and knowledge in the generative AI space and AI overall, and for some of these excellent ideas and insights that are going to help all of us be more efficient and effective at leveraging AI, generative AI for our nonprofit organizations. So thank you all again. Sean, thank you, and
Thank you,
have
Chris.
a great rest of the day.